Our next speaker is Harold Campbell. So Harold is currently an Agile coach, chapter lead at Mauritius Commercial Bank. And Harold helps people improve the way they work, especially in the world of change that we have today. Harold Campbell is in a culture of empathy where employees are empowered to be curious and to experiment. So, today Harold will be talking about 4 learnings and insights to enable agile leadership in the presence of failure and change. So we welcome Harold.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. So before I go fully, just an additional addition, I've spent most of my time working as a software engineer. That's how I actually started my early career. And then I worked as an architect, then a manager, then an engineering coach. And at some point, I was also a consultant. So I've been more than 15 years working in the tech and business space. And the things that I'm going to be sharing with you today are the key learnings and insights that I've had as it pertains to challenges that are spanning teams, leadership, their delivery structures, ways of working. And then beyond the challenges, I'll also be sharing some possible recommendations that I think or I hope can help to solve some of these challenges in your organization. And also just a quick note, you will notice based on my accent that I'm actually Jamaican. I'm not South African, Arun, as you have on the thing. Cool. So the first thing that I would like us to talk about is what is agile leadership? From my perspective, agile leadership is different, firstly, from traditional leadership. When I think about traditional leadership, I think about things or people that are here to manage resources to maximize output. To me, however, agile leadership recognizes that the goal is to instill principles, not necessarily practices, but principles that enable the emergence of high-performing teams. And these teams that we're trying to create, they should be a good fit for the challenges that lay ahead. For instance, Management 3.0, which is a popular framework for looking at growing agile leaders, 6 of their 8 characteristics for leaders focus on growing and empowering teams. So empowering teams with time and resources and encouragement, giving punctual and personalized feedback and coaching. They talk about not centralizing power, but distributing the power to the teams. So they believe that power is greatest in unified teams, etc. And they also focus on creating systems that are capable and adapting to change. And this is quite useful, especially since we're talking about a VUCA world, as Dr. Ismail was talking about. So from a different perspective, in Team of Teams, General McChrystal, they refer to modern effective leaders as being more like gardeners who grow people and find ways to nourish their people's development. And these leaders are less like strategists who go around controlling people like pieces on a chessboard. Still another perspective. In The $1 Trillion Coach, a book by Eric Schmidt, who is one of the co-founders of Google, they commented that the primary job of a leader is to help people to be more effective in their job, to grow and develop, to create an environment where people can flourish and they're liberated so that they can amplify their energies. And they see it as the manager's responsibility to create this environment that support, respect, and trust. So this underscores that the traditional leaders who are here just to maximize output of these resources are very different from agile leaders. The shift, if we shift our thinking about agile leadership as a work leaders conduct, agile leadership allows the company to grow beyond this established bureaucracy, which can be limiting. It also allows for the establishment of principles that are a good fit for solving future problems, even the problems that we don't know we're going to have. And of course, it allows the people to grow so that they can evolve the current systems and create new systems that are capable of adapting in a VUCA world. Now, to be clear, this is hard, right? This is very hard. And a large percentage of agile transformations, around 80% if I remember, they actually fail. But even though it's hard, it doesn't mean that it's impossible. So some of the challenges, the first challenge is that agile leadership is dealing with misalignment. We see when leaders have the same, when leaders in the same company have different goals, that's when we know that there's misalignment, or the goals in generals are not clearly articulated to the team. We also see misalignment when the team's non-functional activities are not seen as adding value. So things like fixing technical debt, ensuring the code is performant, ensuring that we have security built in. And we also hear questions like, can we just throw more people at the problem? Or whose fault is it that we're late for delivery? Or isn't Agile supposed to make us go faster? So misalignment impacts not only just the bottom line, or it impacts the bottom line because it's impacting our team's morale, right? So teams are working harder to deliver, but they're struggling to meet the business demands. So psychological safety plummets, which results in lower team performance, creating this kind of blame culture. And teams are then unable to work on the necessary value-adding work that they need to do. So misalignment also impacts quality. And this, from my perspective, is a very vicious cycle. To give an example, there's not enough time for the teams to deliver value-adding work. So the teams start to take shortcuts. Then quality plummets. Then people start looking out for themselves, and this creates a toxic environment because psychological safety is reduced, causing less collaboration and transparency in the teams. So then naturally we get more delays. And because we get more delays, teams start taking on more work in parallel. This further reduces the quality of the work because we have more context switching. And then naturally, because we have poor quality, we then have more leadership oversight, more governance, more managers, more status meeting, which then results in less time to do value-adding work. And then the cycle repeats, right? And this is a real example of the death spiral of misalignment, especially when it pertains to quality. The unfortunate reality is that there are different perspectives on what we call value-added outcomes. Team outcomes are not always seen as valuable business outcomes. Now, when I talk about business outcomes, I'm talking about anything that the business leaders see as value adding. So example, increasing shareholder value, maybe increasing the utility of new or different products or services. And this is different from team outcomes, or it can be different. When we talk about team outcomes, we're typically talking about the result of the activities done in the teams. Now, I typically observe that most team activities are implicit. So planning, automation, knowledge sharing, research, alignment, etc. These things, these implicit activities are necessary because they enable the explicit, tangible delivery. The challenge is that we overvalue the explicit, example, lines of code or the number of features released, at the expense of the implicit, customer value, code quality, customer research, team health, etc. So the learning here is that the business don't always understand that most team activities are implicit and the translation to rupees and cents is not obvious. So my recommendation is that we coach at different levels, adapting the coaching style for each level. The major challenge with this, however, is that there's to get consistent access to some levels further up is harder than others. But by coaching at the different levels, what we get is the coaching is more aligned to help get the outcomes that the business is looking for at each level. And when I talk about these levels, I'm talking about 3 levels. The team level, the value stream level, and the organization or strategic level. So we can think about the team level as your operational level, the value stream as your coordination level, and your strategic level, the organization level as your strategic level. And each level has its own focus. At the team level, the first thing that we want to think about is improving psychological safety. How effectively do people work as a team? Are they able to give and receive feedback? Are the teams able to effectively retrospect? The next thing is improving delivery practices. So naturally, are the teams able to deliver effectively? Are we able to improve their design, their engineering, their QA, and their product practices? Are we visualizing and planning and managing work effectively? Are we empowering the teams to actively reduce waste? And then, of course, we need to help them to improve outcomes. And here, Are the teams delivering the expected outcomes? And outcomes refer both to customer value and business value, which we'll talk about shortly. Further up, we talk about the value stream, and again, we start with people. So we want to improve people dynamics. So how effectively do teams deliver together? Are we focused on blame or root cause when there's a problem? How do we empower teams to make decisions faster? And then the next thing is to improve our cross-team practices. Are we effectively identifying and removing constraints that are limiting the teams? So are we reducing alignment hurdles with cross-team planning? Are we actively trying to reduce and eliminate dependencies across teams? Are we trying to reduce team handoff? And naturally, we talk about outcomes also, right? And here are the teams able to sequence and deliver the right value? At the strategic level or organizational level, the focus here is on culture. How effective are we at creating a culture that sustains our growth and innovation? Do we perform evaluation practices that reinforce or inhibit the culture we're trying to create? Next, we can talk about feedback loops. Do we get the right information to the right people in a timely manner? Are we effectively making data-informed decisions? And are we able to push decisions closer down to where the work is being done? And of course, outcomes in this case now become strategic outcomes. And we can naturally ask the question, is the company as a whole, as a unit, delivering the right value? The second challenge for agile leadership is customer centricity, which is somewhat misunderstood. The question that companies ask is, how do we position ourselves to maximize our value proposition in a crowded market? It's a profound question, and companies are trying various new customer approaches to gain the upper hand. Presently, you hear things like, we're doing design thinking and we're doing customer centricity. All of these things are the range. However, there's a vast difference between customer centricity and the product-centric approach. And what most companies consider a customer-centric approach is just a better form of product centricity. When I talk about a product-centric approach, to me, this is the traditional approach. It's where we treat customers as being uninformed and we push products to the customers. It's where we have massive marketing and sales campaigns that's targeting the customers. And these approaches tend to be intrusive, right? So we're pushing products to the stupid masses. And some companies go as far as using unethical lock-in practices to try to prevent their customers from leaving. And this kind of approach is what we can consider the industrial era thinking, right? We build it, they will come. A customer-centric approach, what most companies are doing is more aligned to the customer's needs. And it's a significant departure from a product-centric approach. Here, we know that customers are informed and they're engaged, so they use data to make decisions. And because we know that customers hate intrusive sales, we do less of it. Instead, we get products and sale opportunities mostly word of mouth and based on other customers, including celebrities, who are using and recommending our products. And this is kind of aligned with what we call the experience economy, where people have moved from simply wanting to use the products and they want to experience them. They want to be seen in these products, right? So you think about everybody typically has like a health tracker or one of those smart watches or whatever. Now, from my perspective, a customer-focused organization creates experiences that make customers feel the companies used to do business with. And the key point here is that the companies are only interested in making it easier for their customers to do more business with them because they understand their customers' needs. The subtle difference between the customer-centric versus the customer focus is the importance placed on actively delivering both high value and high business value and high customer value. So it's not at the expense of one versus the other. A customer-led approach, from what I'm thinking, is the customer. We see when we have statements like the customer is vital for our business, and innovation, business strategy, etc., are actively influenced by the customer's concerns. the company will first and foremost make decisions to actively ensure that they serve multiple interests. So in real terms, our customer-centric experience is unique, memorable, and seamless across channels, and it's focusing on the best solution that enables them to accomplish their tasks. So you can think of it from these three spheres, right? Where we have the customer experience along with the customer life cycle. And then we're here at customer centricity in the middle when we think about how are we helping the customers to derive the most value from what the work they're doing. A key point to note is that it's easier and cheaper to acquire new customers and maintain existing customers when we use customer centricity, because the customers sell the products for you. And of course, the lower your customer experience, the higher it is to acquire new customers. Now, if we're supposed to plot some popular companies on a scale of like high customer value and high business value, IKEA and Netflix are all the way up there on the top right-hand corner. It's both high value and high business value. Facebook is at the bottom because Facebook, although it has high business value, it employs predatory business behavior that is known to be harmful to its customers. So the learning here is our customer value is not the same as business value. So the recommendation is, depending on what the company is trying to achieve, my approach is try to reduce misalignment, which protects the teams, and then advocate that teams deliver what is needed for the current moment. Create policies and ceremonies that help the organization to adapt and grow. And depending on the maturity of the company's delivery and product approach, it may be necessary to use a blended approach, right? So you may use a customer focus approach in some areas, customer centric approach in others, or depending on if you're just in survival mode, you do what you need to do. The key is understanding your approach and being transparent about it, so as not to confuse the teams and create misalignment. For example, implementing MVPs, if you're using lean startup, is painful for project teams that are in a product-centric company. And of course, be aware that it's a journey, right? So experiment and learn. Now, the third challenge for agile leadership is delivery. And this is kind of a big one. I found that delivery means different things at different levels. And when we talk about different levels, we're talking about the individual level, the team level, the value stream, business area, etc. Each level will have different goals and expectations. There are different risks and exposures. There are different expected outcomes. There are different behaviors. And you even have different microcultures at the different levels. And when we talk about like delivery goals, you'll see that at the individual level, we may talk about individual performance. Whilst at the team level, we may talk about your team performance. All the way down to the company level, we're talking about your market and shareholder targets. And of course, the last three, this is where leaders predominantly care the most about. It's your strategic level goals. So for leaders, the learning for me is that it's almost always about delivery. So leaders care predominantly about the things that impact the strategic delivery. And by impact, I'm talking about things that are either impeding or enabling. Their day-to-day focus is to get information to access the impact. And to do this, the recommendation is align delivery expectation to the key decision makers. So we want to provide transparency, improve alignment, and address dependency management. In practical terms, agile leadership promotes ceremonies, initiatives, and activities. And our goal is to create a culture that provides the transparency, improves the alignment, and addresses the dependency management. And notice, it's not practices, it's the culture that we want to be able to create these things. So transparency, we need to promote transparency at all levels. At the team levels, this may just be things like your daily stand-up sprint reviews with your PMO and stakeholders. At the value stream level, it may be similar alignment with your daily, weekly check-ins or project reviews. At the strategic level, it may be alignment or review ceremonies that happen fortnightly, monthly, or quarterly. When you're trying to improve alignment, here we're referring to the team and value stream and strategic level. And for me, it's again, just different planning and refinement ceremonies at each level. The only thing that's different is the frequency, the audience, and the granularity of the details. And of course, we want to promote a top-down and bottom-up objectives. This helps to align the teams, and this is crucial it's crucial to have shared objectives, especially for teams that are spanning multiple projects. Dependency management is a silent killer in organizations. It literally sucks the lives from projects and initiatives and teams. And from my perspective, it's the biggest source of waste in your organization. But the secret weapon here is just having effective retrospectives at the different at the end of each iteration at the different failure points. And for me, these failure points tend to be your value streams, your business area levels, and of course, your strategic and company levels. Now, the fourth challenge and final challenge that I'd like to share relates to agile transformations. Most transformations often fail for various reasons, right? The statement that resonates with me is that agile transformations are rarely started just to improve the well-being of staff. So yes, you'll hear things like our staff are important to us, our customers are important to us, and we're going to create a transformation because we need to help everybody and make sure everybody's aligned. But at the end of the day, if you think about it, staff engagement is seen as a benefit, but it's not the core thesis for having a transformation. It is important to note that it's not the entire purpose. Corporates are mostly in the business of making money for their shareholders. They aren't charities. Above all, it's about the delivery of business value and maximizing shareholder value. So when you think about the transformation, we have to ask the question, firstly, what type of transformation are we doing? And what's the source of this transformation? What's the outcome of this transformation? What are the stories that we've told or the expectations of the transformation? Is everybody aligned to why we're having this transformation? And at the end of the day, how do we know if the transformation is successful? In the 4 disciplines of execution, it's a wonderful book. It talks about, how do leaders execute better? They commented that 65%, a whopping 65% of transformation projects require behavior change. So even before we start moving people around, getting new technology and new tools, we have to ask ourselves, what are the behavior changes that we're trying to promote with this new transformation? And knowing why a transformation is being done is important, because a lot of it may be done for the wrong reasons if we don't know why we're doing it. So knowing the impact that the transformation is going to have is even more important, right? So it's knowing why we're doing it and also knowing the impact that we're trying to have. And then not everyone understands the scope of changes needed to have a successful transformation. So I've literally worked in several organizations where we're going to do agile, and then when you make it clear that, we need to shift decisioning closer to the teams that are doing the work, people freak out, because it's like, oh my God, I'm no longer going to be a leader who can go around and tell people what to do. And that sometimes scares people. Or we have difficulty in trusting the people to do the work because we have a culture where we haven't started with growing the leader's mindset and shifting them from a scarcity mindset to a growth mindset. This gets even more complicated when we get consultants in the mix. So agile is often sold as a quick and cheap fix for deliver challenges, and neither of these statements are true, right? So this particular approach or mindset is based on the idea that ultimately all of our problems are because we have bad people and we just need to fix them, right? Whereas from a coaching perspective, we believe that all people are awesome and we have bad systems or inefficient systems that in actuality are the things that need to be improved. So transformations struggle when there isn't sufficient leadership support, right? And the transformations are more than process and people change. So this particular statement resonates with me in this article from Forbes. If the CEO isn't afraid, if the CEO is afraid to say bureaucracy must die, then it won't. If your leader isn't willing to get up and draw a line in the sand and say this particular way that we've been operating for years is no longer acceptable, then it will never change, right? So the transformation in and of itself, it requires real cultural change, and corporate culture is shaped from the top. So the learning here is that agile coaches cannot empower teams by themselves. In fact, you can't empower teams. You can create an environment where the teams can become empowered. So it's erroneous to believe that simply hiring a few agile coaches, scrum masters, some team coaches, a sprinkling of agile around the organization, or reorganizing the people into new teams, it certainly won't fully change the culture of the organization, right? It won't make the people suddenly become empowered. We suddenly won't be able to adopt the practices that we're seeing, or even the delivery cadence of several of the other companies that have been doing and experimenting and failing and learning from their failures for years based on their journey through Agile. So real lasting empowerment comes from changes that start at the top. It's reinforced by policies from the top. And of course, it's reinforced by the leaders who are demonstrating changes in the behaviors that we're expecting from our line and staff members. So if we're saying that, transparency and feedback is something that we expect, then leaders need to be willing to ask for feedback and must be willing to give feedback. If we're saying that we're holding people accountable and we expect people to be held accountable, then leaders themselves need to be held accountable, and they need to tell people that they want to be held accountable, right? So the behaviors that we're expecting in the team, those behaviors need to be demonstrated by leaders, and it must start from the top. This is another statement that resonates with me from the same article. The real issue is not how to kill bureaucracy. It's how do we build organizations that are truly capable? When we look at it this way, we realize that what we're up against is not a set of unhelpful processes and practices, but rather a set of legacy principles. They are not necessarily bad principles, but they're not a good fit for the challenges that lay ahead. So the recommendation here is be clear on the role and purpose of Agile in your organization, right? Be clear on the role and purpose of what we're trying to achieve. And of course, leaders need to over communicate on what is being delivered and how. If you're planning on Agile transformation, then my honest request is that don't start with the team. And it's always easiest to start with the team because you can easily just move a few people around. But for me, it's more important and more impactful if we start with a mindset shift, or start by focusing with a mindset shift at the leadership level. So moving them from a scarcity mindset to a growth mindset. And of course, we want to work with partners to create an environment that fosters agility. So the key takeaways from this that I'd like you to leave with: team outcomes aren't always valuable business outcomes. Customer value isn't the same as business value. Leaders care a hell of a lot more about delivery than we realize. And of course, Agile coaches can't empower teams. So I want to leave you with this thought. A small percent of Agile transformations are successful. And I really hope that this helps to be one of them. There are some books that have helped to shape my thinking over the years, some of which I've used in creating this talk. So, and I'm happy to keep the conversation going at agilemauritius.com. And you can also find me at LinkedIn as Harold Campbell. All right. Thank you so much. Arun, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Harold. Thank you. That was quite inspiring and a lot of good advice and insights for our audience. We have a few questions. So the first question is about engagement and alignment to objectives. So the question is, at the moment, there's in many organizations, there's a lot of changes going on, and people feel pressured. So what's your advice for the employees to communicate back to the leadership if there's a sort of communication gap?
Cool. So the first thing that I would try to do is make the challenges visible. I always try to make the work visible. So if the teams can show that they're competing objectives, then that helps. So if you can find like one leader that's influential and receptive, and if you communicate in a manner that is from their perspective, you know, make it important to them. Show them, if we do these things, it will help you to achieve your particular goal. That's one way that I think is a good way to start. What we've seen is that you can also experiment with small teams or small groups of teams. If they can align on being clear on the objectives that they're trying to address and then show tangible outcomes, then it's the easier sell upwards and across the organization. But it's not easy. I will acknowledge that.
All right. So as a coach, what are the major difficulties that you have, and how do you address them? What's the advice for future coaches?
I think patience and mindfulness is something I would do. I would focus on as a coach. You need to find a mechanism to protect your own mental health first and foremost, because as a coach, you're a change agent and most of your work is fighting uphill, right? Unless you've gone into an organization that's already very mature. If you're in organizations that are still toxic or in the red zone, then most of your work is uphill. And then I would also try to focus on participating in the broader community to get ideas and get additional experiences. And then finally, try to learn as much as possible. You know, read, watch videos, go to conferences like PMI, like this one, come to Agile Mauritius, blog. Try and build this network where you're constantly learning and sharing.
Okay, thank you, Harold. So we're just about on time, and thank you a lot for the session. I'm sure we'll continue discussing. We will have the next session now, so we'll be preparing for the panel. Thank you.